No one's going to tell you this. Not in school, not your father, not even your closest friends. Because this is one of those brutal truths every man has to learn the hard way. Not through books, but through blood, through wasted years, through 2 a.m. breakdowns no one sees, through the hollow stare of a man who gave everything to the wrong woman and lost himself in the process. And when you finally look back, you won't see a villain. You won't see war. You won't see a knife in your back. You'll see something worse. Your reflection, standing in the ruins of your own potential, asking the only question that matters: how did I let everything fall apart? Without even putting up a fight, because you chose the wrong woman. And Niccolo Machiavelli warned us centuries ago, men are not destroyed by their enemies. They are destroyed by those they allow through their gates. You weren't betrayed by fate. You were conquered by your own decision. And here's the cold truth. Society won't dare say aloud, a woman is not your purpose. She is either an asset or a liability. There is no gray zone. Choose right, and your life elevates. Choose wrong, and everything you've built becomes fuel for the fire. They'll tell you love is blind, that you should follow your heart, that to love is to forgive, to endure, to be patient. But Machiavelli would laugh in your face. He wrote, "A wise ruler builds his kingdom not on sentiment, but on strategy. He who lets emotion lead becomes a servant to someone else's desires." You're not here to please. You're here to survive, to build, to reign. And empires aren't built on blind affection. They're built on ruthless discernment. So stop, look in the mirror, and ask yourself directly, the woman you've chosen, is she building you up, or is she slowly suffocating your soul? Picture this. He used to be a man full of ambition, eyes lit with vision, chest full of breath, ready to shape the world with bare hands. But now, he's sitting in his car, alone, middle of the night, street lights flickering through the windshield, like judgmental eyes, his hand limp on the steering wheel, his gaze swallowed by the dark. He no longer dreams of greatness. He no longer hungers for more. He only longs for one thing: silence. Don't make excuses. Don't say, "She's not that bad." Because fire doesn't need to rage to destroy a man. It only needs time. And what was Machiavelli's first lesson to men? The wise act immediately. The fool waits until it's too late. So what about you? Will you act now, or will you wait a few more years and watch your kingdom burn? If this message stings, if something in your chest is catching fire, don't smother it. That's not pain. That's your instincts waking up after a long sleep. Let it wake. Let it remind you of who you were before you forgot. And more importantly, of what you're still here to build. If you see yourself in these words, if part of your soul is silently nodding, don't just scroll past like it means nothing. Tap like, subscribe to this channel, and send this to one man you know is standing at the edge. Because today, you're not just listening to a video, you're stepping into a war to reclaim your life. And you're going to need every ounce of clarity, courage, and cunning that Machiavelli passed down for those bold enough to hear it. And if you're listening right now, this isn't coincidence. This is your wake-up call. You've been told to look for chemistry, to chase butterflies, to follow your heart. But what no one told you is that those butterflies, they can be warnings, not signs of love, but signals of danger. Men who ignore them usually wake up years later, chained to a woman who didn't explode his life, but melted it, slowly, from the inside out. Machiavelli never wrote about dating, but he wrote about power, he wrote about strategy, and he understood that the people closest to you hold the power to shape or shatter your destiny. Because the woman you allow into your world will either multiply your mission or dismantle it, with a smile on her face and your fire in her hands. So forget the fairy tales. This isn't about finding the one. This is about avoiding the wrong one. There are 5 laws you must live by, not to find love, but to protect your legacy. It sounds obvious, but it's the most common mistake men make. And it comes with the highest price tag. A beautiful woman with no values, no depth, no loyalty, is not a blessing. She's a polished grenade. And if you ignore the pin, she will explode your future. You may admire her face. You may desire her body. But that's not the test. The real test is this. Can she sit in silence without chasing attention? Can she honor her word when no one's watching? Can she delay gratification when temptation whispers? Because men who lose everything aren't destroyed by disaster. They're destroyed by details they refuse to inspect. Machiavelli said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." So are you one of the few, or are you still letting beauty blind you and calling it love? A leader doesn't just admire, evaluatis. He doesn't chase the glitter. He studies the ground beneath it. This isn't about being superior. It's about alignment. If she mocks your leadership, if she treats your structure like a suggestion, if she resists instead of harmonizes, she is not a partner. She is a problem waiting to detonate. How many men do you know who live in quiet resignation because the woman beside them has been slowly breaking their spine? With every joke, every interruption, every dismissal of their authority, she smiled for the photos. But since that day, she's been chipping away at his foundation. And the man, he stayed. He tried to be understanding. He compromised until he forgot what he was even standing for. Machiavelli warned, "He who becomes a slave to others' opinions forfeits his own strength." So ask yourself honestly, are you standing on your values or sitting quietly while they're being torn apart? Most women are pleasant when the spotlight is on, when they're praised, texted, adored. But when the attention fades, when life slows down, does she sit in peace? Or does she ignite chaos just to feel alive? Picture this. You come home after a long, brutal day. You don't want drama. You want stillness. But she's waiting, not with support, with an argument over nothing. Why? Because the silence made her feel unseen. Because peace is boring to a woman who confuses attention with love. A woman who cannot control her emotions in boredom will unravel you during a crisis. You don't need fire. You need foundation. Because life is already chaotic. You need someone who calms the storm, not one who brings the lightning. It doesn't matter how much chemistry you have. If your core beliefs don't align, you're not building a future. You're preparing for war. Does she roll her eyes when you speak about your goals? Does she mock your morning discipline? Does she treat your purpose like an inconvenience? If so, she is not a teammate. She is a ticking bomb, set to detonate the moment life gets serious. Machiavelli wrote, "A ruler must guard his foundation with more care than his front door." And your foundation isn't her feelings. It's your focus, your mission, your legacy. If she doesn't respect it, she doesn't belong in it. That may sound cruel, but it's the law of nature. We don't value what we think we own. We value what we fear losing. Gold is locked behind steel. Thrones are guarded by armies. And the man who makes himself too available becomes the man no one takes seriously. So test her. Withdraw. Say no. Go. Silent. Not to play games, but to reveal the truth. If she panics, guilt trips, manipulates. She was there for control, not connection. But if she stays composed, if she maintains respect, if she matches your silence with poise, you found a woman who understands worth. Let me ask you, have you ever felt truly valued? Not desired, valued so deeply that someone feared losing you, feared it enough to grow, to align, to rise with you? If not, maybe you've never really been loved, at least not in the way that sharpens you. Because here's the truth, before any woman can value you, you must become the man who would rather walk alone than be tolerated like an option. Most men think power is about being loud, being dominant, being seen. They confuse volume with influence. But Machiavelli knew better. He wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose." But let's be clear, this isn't fear in the way most people think. Not fear of violence, not fear of harm. It's presence. The kind of presence that shifts the temperature of a room without saying a word. The kind of presence that makes people reconsider interrupting you, not because you're aggressive, but because you're immovable. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to explain yourself. Because power doesn't plead. Power doesn't over-explain. Power simply is. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most modern men have lost that presence, not because they're weak physically, but because they've abandoned something more vital, their standards. You want to know where most men fall. Not in battle, not in heartbreak, not in public. They fall in negotiation. In the quiet moments where they trade pieces of themselves just to keep the peace. She didn't mean it. It was just one time. I should have been more understanding. No, you should have walked. You should have defended your inner code like it was sacred. Because once you bend, she learns something. You are negotiable. And from that point on, every boundary becomes flexible. Every standard becomes optional. Machiavelli warned, power is not given, it is taken, and kept by those willing to enforce it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever said no to a woman and watched her entire mood shift? Not because you were cruel, but because for the first time, she saw your spine. That's not rejection. That's revelation. It reveals how many people only loved your softness, not your strength. A man with standards terrifies the world because he can't be guilted. He can't be manipulated. He doesn't play the role of the nice guy who sacrifices himself for emotional crumbs. Now here's the twist. The moment you become afraid of losing her, she stops fearing the loss of you. And that tiny shift, that invisible exchange of power, changes everything. She starts testing you, not because she's evil, but because the feminine does not trust what it does not respect. And respect isn't given through gifts, flowers, or sweet words. It's earned through consistency, through boundaries, through consequence. You say you want to be her rock, but rocks don't bend. They don't apologize for being solid. They just exist firm, grounded, unshackable. So let me give you a rule. Most men are too scared to follow. When she crosses the line, you don't lecture, you don't argue, you don't explain. You correct. With your absence, you don't disappear to punish. You disappear to remind. Because if she never fears losing you, she will never take your presence seriously. Imagine a man who is always available, always texting back, always saying yes, always accommodating. It looks noble on the outside, but underneath, it's desperation, wrapped in politeness. And women can smell it. And Machiavelli made it brutally clear. The prince who tries to be loved at all costs will be destroyed. Why? Because love without boundaries becomes expectation, and expectation becomes entitlement. She expects your forgiveness. She expects your energy. She expects your sacrifice. And when she doesn't get it, she punishes you with silence, with distance, with disrespect. Ask yourself, are you being loved? Or are you being tolerated? Are you being admired? Or are you just being useful? This is the moment most men collapse, because they've built their identity around being liked, being chosen, being needed. But if you become her emotional provider, without ever becoming her leader, she'll take from you endlessly and still leave you for someone she actually respects. This is not about being mean. It's about being immovable, because the man who fears loss becomes a servant. But the man who accepts it, who welcomes it when his standard is violated, that man becomes untouchable. Let me say it again. A man who is willing to walk away will always hold the power. She may not admit it, she may not show it, but deep down, she knows there is a line she cannot cross. And that line is what builds true attraction. So here's your strategy. Don't react. Respond. Don't explain. Enforce. Don't chase. Choose. Because the man who governs himself governs. everything. And the one who can say no without fear will never be ruled again. Comment, King below, if you've ever walked away from a woman who forgot your worth. This message wasn't entertainment. It was a declaration. If it spoke to you, speak back. Tap like, subscribe, and share this with a brother who's still bleeding quietly. She doesn't scream. She doesn't slam doors. She doesn't raise her voice, because she doesn't have to. The woman who destroys you does it quietly. She waits. Waits for you to lower your guard. Waits for you to trade your boundaries for peace. Waits for you to say yes when your soul is screaming no. And most men don't even notice, because she doesn't burn your house down. She removes the bricks, slowly, while smiling. No chaos, no violence. Just erosion. Steady, silent, strategic. She doesn't take everything at once. She just takes your edge, your presence, your instinct, your fire, until one day, you wake up beside her, feeling like a ghost of the man you once were. Not because she shattered you, but because you allowed yourself to be bent, one small compromise at a time. Picture a man scrolling his phone at 3 a.m., not to check messages, not to chase attention, but because something in him has gone numb. He doesn't even know what he's looking for anymore. Just a flicker, a memory, a version of himself he lost somewhere between her silence and his surrender. Let me be clear, not all women are like this. But the ones who are, they don't come with red flags. They come with charm, with softness, with timing so perfect. You mistake manipulation for affection. They know how to cry just enough to keep you guilty, how to validate you just enough to stop you from leaving. But deep down, they don't love you. They love what you provide. And when your strength starts to fade, so does their affection. You try harder. You give more. You explain. You wait. And every time you reach out, she offers indifference, withdraws intimacy, uses silence as punishment, love as reward, affection as a leash. And here's the twist. You call it love. You think you're being patient, but you're not. You're being trained. She doesn't need to scream. She just sighs, rolls her eyes, stares through you, interrupts your goals with sarcasm, mocks your discipline with passive aggression. And you comply, not because you're weak, but because you want peace. You tell yourself, she's not the problem. Maybe I need to be more loving. No, she is the problem. And even worse, you've become the excuse. Because what costs nothing is worth nothing. And a man who never makes her fear losing him will never be respected. Machiavelli said it best. Men should be either caressed or destroyed, because they will avenge slight injuries, but not fatal ones. Women follow that same instinct, whether they realize it or not. If she knows you won't leave, she stops fearing your absence. And once that fear dies, respect dies with it. You become predictable, tolerable, replaceable. You become her therapist, her emotional butler, her silent witness to a drama you never asked to join. And the worst part, you saw it coming. You felt the shift, but you stayed. Because you confuse sacrifice with strength, and you called erosion love. But this isn't love. It's a system, a psychological structure built to punish your authenticity and reward your submission. Machiavelli warned, the man who builds his kingdom on the love of others, rather than fear of loss, builds on sand, and sand doesn't hold weight. It crumbles. So ask yourself, are you building a future? Or are you just surviving her moods? Do you wake up as a man with purpose, or as a man measuring the temperature of her silence? Let me say something most won't dare to say. The wrong woman doesn't just cost you money, time, or energy. She'll cost you your edge. And when a man loses that, he loses everything. You look in the mirror, and something's missing. Not your face, not your strength, but that thing in your chest. That undeniable clarity, that sharp instinct, that fire that once made you undeniable. Maybe it started the first time she mocked your dream and you let it slide. Maybe it was when she withheld warmth and you apologized. Maybe it was the moment you explained yourself. Instead of enforcing your boundary, you didn't lose it overnight. You surrendered it, one emotional compromise at a time. And now you're not who you were. Still standing, still smiling, still functioning, but bleeding. And the truth is, she doesn't even care. Not because she's cruel, but because you trained her to ignore your pain. You taught her your standards were elastic. Your patience was infinite. Your identity was negotiable. And what does Machiavelli say? A ruler who is not himself wise cannot be wisely advised. You allowed your weakness to become the blueprint of the relationship, and she followed it. She will again. So will the next one, unless you break the cycle. Let me ask you something brutal. Would you want your son to live like this? Would you want him to tolerate what you've tolerated? To mistake punishment for partnership? If the answer is no, then why are you doing it to yourself? You are not a background character in her story. You are not a broken project she's trying to fix. You are not a man made to serve her moods. You are a builder, a leader, a keeper of legacy. And any woman who subtracts from your vision, no matter how sweet, how sexy, or how familiar, does not belong in your kingdom. So here's the bottom line. If she's not multiplying your fire, she's extinguishing your future. And if you continue to stay, to explain, to shrink, then understand this. The ruins of your life won't be her fault. They'll be your reflection. You've heard the warnings. You felt the sting. Now comes the moment of reckoning. Because what you're facing isn't just a bad relationship. It's a crossroads. Two paths. One leads to decay, the other to rebirth. On one path, you keep compromising. Keep apologizing for wanting respect. Keep shrinking yourself to preserve a false peace. Keep waiting for her to become the woman you imagined, instead of confronting the woman she really is. The other path, you walk away, not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity. Clarity that says, I would rather face silence alone than keep bleeding for someone who isn't even holding the knife anymore. This is where most men fail. They stay, they settle, they convince themselves that slow death is normal because it's familiar. But Machiavelli understood something that too many men forget. He who builds on hope alone is doomed. Real power lies in fear of loss, in boundaries, in limits. You think love will save you, but love without respect is not salvation. It's a slow surrender, dressed in poetic words and sweet memories. Let me ask you something. No one else will. Would she still choose you if she saw the man you're becoming? Not the man she's been using, but the man who no longer tolerates emotional debt. Or is she invested in keeping you small? Does your disempowerment serve her comfort? Does your hesitation feed her control? Because, here's the part, no one tells you. Some women don't fear losing you. They fear you outgrowing them. They fear what will happen if you rise beyond their reach, beyond their narrative, beyond their emotional leverage. That's the true test. When you start evolving, will she rise with you? Or will she start tearing pieces off your wings? Just to make sure you don't fly too far. You see, most men think attention is affection, that convenience is connection, that survival equals success. But you don't come alive until you realize one thing. Sometimes, the thing you need to lose is yourself, the version of you that bent too much, waited too long, believed too deeply in someone who never saw your full worth. He doesn't even notice he's dying anymore, because it's become his new definition of living. The greatest tragedy is not losing a woman, it's losing yourself, trying to keep her. So, I want you to pause and picture the life you could have had. Not a fantasy, a grounded, disciplined, peaceful life, a home that breathes clarity, a mission that wakes you up before the alarm, a silence that feels sacred, not weaponized. Now ask yourself, what have you traded that life for? Your fire, your instinct, your edge? If your answer is yes, understand this. She hasn't stolen anything. You gave it away, one emotional compromise at a time. Because men don't become weak by accident. They become weak by choice, by tolerating too much, by staying too long, by avoiding the truth they already know. And you know, don't you, You know she doesn't admire you. You know she's not aligned with your mission. You know she doesn't fear losing you, because you've never shown her what it means to be lost. So here's your mirror. Would the man, in your reflection, respect the life you're living now? Would he call this strength? Would he call this love? Would he see a king, or a man still begging for the approval of someone who stopped seeing his worth long ago? Machiavelli wrote, "It is not titles that honor men, but men who honor titles. Stop calling yourself a man. If you're living like an afterthought, stop calling it love. If it feels like emotional suicide, you weren't made for this. You weren't built to crawl. You were born to rise. And if she can't rise with you, then let her stay behind, because your light was never meant to be dimmed, so someone else could stay comfortable in the dark. You have one edge, one fire, one legacy, and every day you delay is one day closer to becoming the man you swore you'd never become. So I'll ask you this, not as a speaker, not as a stranger, but as a brother, will you rise or will you rot? Because no woman can destroy you unless you hand her the power to do so. And if you already did, take it back, not with vengeance, but with vision, with standards, with silence, because your soul is your kingdom. And it's time you started ruling it like one. You don't rise by accident. You don't become powerful because a woman chose you. You rise because you chose yourself. Again and again and again. You rise by being ruthless with your standards, by deciding, once and for all, that your peace is not up for negotiation. Because in a world that wants to soften you, weaken you, tame you, pull you away from your mission, your standards are your sword, your shield, your silent declaration that says, I know who I am, and I know what I will never allow again. Machiavelli once said, the ends justify the means, and for a man, the end is not comfort, not attention, not validation. The end is legacy. The end is waking up beside a woman who respects your silence more than she craves your approval. So let me ask you now, not as a performer, not as a personality, but as a brother who has bled like you've bled. What do you actually require in a woman? Not what you tolerate, not what you explain away. What you require from your soul. Is it loyalty? Is it discipline? Is it emotional control? Is it alignment with your mission? The ability to sit in silence and still be sacred. Then live like it. Walk like it. Speak like it. Choose like it. Because the next time you lower your standard, just to avoid being alone, you are not compromising. You are sacrificing. And the thing you're sacrificing is you. She doesn't need to fear your anger. She needs to feel your standard in the way you speak, in the way you stay silent, in your ability to say no without shaking, in your ability to walk away without looking back. Because the man who stays after his boundary is broken is not noble. He is disposable. And the woman who learns that she can break your law without consequence will never again treat you like a king. You don't teach her with lectures. You teach her with distance, with absence, with unwavering presence, with the kind of dignity that doesn't scream, but echoes, the kind of stillness that demands respect without asking for it. And if you've already chosen wrong, if you feel trapped, tired, torn apart, then hear me clearly. It is not too late, but it will cost you. It will cost your comfort, your illusion, your old identity, the version of you that accepted crumbs and called it love. But ask yourself, what's more expensive, leaving now or dying slowly for the next 20 years? You were not born to be a lesson. You were not made to be a man who looks back and explains everything he lost. You were born to be the man who builds so powerfully that the wrong woman never even makes it past the gate. So who are the real kings? They're not the ones with money, not the ones with titles, not the ones with crowds. They are the ones who live by a code so unshakable that any woman who enters their life either levels up or walks out. That's the king's standard, and it begins with you, not with revenge, but with remembering So if this message lit something inside you, if part of you felt the fire return, if part of you remembered the man you used to be, before you bent for too long, then don't let that moment pass. Tap like, subscribe to this channel, and share this with one man who's still sleeping in a life he never chose. Because this isn't just content, this is a call to arms, a war for the soul of the modern man. And the ones who refuse to wake up will spend their lives justifying what they lost. But you will rise, you will rule, you will live, like a man who never forgets. The crown belongs only to those who refuse to kneel,